Tide, everybody. It's time for the All-American Report, and there he is, the two-time All-American Mike Johnson, played for Alabama, won a ring for the Crimson Tide. Not only did he beat Tim Tebow, but then he went on to beat Colt McCoy in Texas in 2009, and you guys may know him from Atlanta Falcons football. What's up, dude? Roll Tide.
Hey, Roll Tide, man. Coming off a pretty good weekend for Bama, obviously, and a crazy weekend in the college football landscape. Let's just put it that way, man. Without a lot of top 25 games on tap. I don't know about you. I don't know what your weekend plans looked like, man, but I was glued to the couch. Well, I say glued to the couch. I'm a dad of two small children, so it was more like I was glued to the living room on my feet, but watching TV, but on my feet. You know what I mean? Like I can't go too far away from the kids and the toys, man.
It's where you are right now in life. But yeah, no, a lot of college football. We'll have to talk about the Georgia-Kentucky game because I don't know that really helps Alabama to have Georgia totally look past Kentucky. And also, I thought some of the officiating calls in that game were suspicious to the under and also to the cover. But we'll get maybe I'm just throwing that out there. Alabama, though, went to Wisconsin. They didn't have the bevy of holding penalties on the offensive line. And I felt like the offensive line was the reason that Alabama absolutely dominated that football game 42-10.
Yeah, it was a lot different, wasn't it? And I think that was the exciting thing. Feels like you finally got the full product that is Alabama's offense right now. And, look, you still had a few 3-and-outs that are a little bit unsettling. I think, if Bama fans want to really get the microscope out and start to dig into it. But I got to tell you, Mick, if I had to deal with a few 3-and-outs and have the explosive offense that Alabama has right now with how they run vertically in their passing game, it's just something I think we're gonna have to deal with, right? Because it was unbelievable the explosion they had, offensively throughout that game. I thought it was nice to see kind of a fully developed game plan offensively in terms of what this team can do.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, what did you think of the offensive line play? It was good to have Caden Proctor back finally.
Yeah. Well, and look, you and I mentioned this kind of last week leading into this game. I thought it was a good matchup for Alabama's offensive line either way. I don't think, speed-wise from Wisconsin defensively, you don't really have those edge defenders that you're going to have, in some of these SEC matchups. And so I think that played well into Alabama's hands and Caden Proctor and Elijah Pritchett and everybody else. So, I thought they played really, really well. I almost expected him to play really, really well. Once the news came out that Caden Proctor was back and he was going to be able to play, I was like, okay, that really bodes well for Alabama. But I love the imagination, the ingenuity they show in the run game. Man, it's just it's a physical. You can tell that it's a almost simplistic version of the offense they're trying to run, where they run the counter GT and everything else. They're so good at it, right? Because there's not that many different things being thrown at them. So I thought they were physical. I love the way that both tackles really throughout the game stood up to the bull rushes. I think that was really what gave us issues in the first couple of weeks. So the physicality, rolling guys off the ball, pulling guards, having physicality. I thought it was beautiful. Honestly, it was let's give them an A-. I think if I'm going to really be critical, but you can win all day, every day with the brand of football they played up front this past weekend.
Guys, our show is brought to you by mybookie.ag. mybookie.ag, and it's a great time to take advantage of the promo code next round because they'll double your initial deposit. That's right. MyBookie will double your initial deposit when you use the code next round. Kick off the football season with mybookie.ag, where they'll double your initial deposit using the promo code next round. Just like on my shirt here, next round. Mike, the question I have for you is I'm watching this offense. It's clearly, to me, better than last year. It just is. I'm going to start with one thing. Why didn't we see these RPOs and these designed runs for Jalen Milroe last year? He's the best runner on the team, and he was last year. And it just felt like the only time we ever saw the guy run was when Alabama had him scramble because he was trying to run for his life. Those plays to me are just such a weapon, and he scored what 2 or 3 touchdowns on the ground doing it last time.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think you did see him. I think you saw him as the year kind of wore on. I don't think you saw him earlier in the season, but I think as the year wore on, I mean, you go back to some of the carries he had against Georgia, those were definitely design plays. I think that's the reason they won that game so handily.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll say this about Jalen Milroe. I think that he very much in one direction is very, very good, but he's not the kind of quarterback to me that's going to, juke you or run at you and make you, pick a direction. I think he's best when he's going forward. I mean, you go back to some of the plays and some of the scrambles even in the Michigan game. I was like, it kind of left me wanting more. I'm like, man, you kind of came up a yard short of a first down. You feel like you could have juked somebody or, made somebody miss or broken a tackle and you come up short. But I think with the design runs, right, the RPO schemes, like you mentioned, where there's just more than just one other option other than Jalen Milroe, I think that's where he's so deadly, right? And I think that when you look at the things he's been asked to do, he knows exactly what's about to happen. And when Jalen Milroe sees what he's expecting to happen and it actually does come to fruition on the defense, I think that's when he's dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. Like when he reads things and he looks out with the confidence and, he says, oh, man, this is the exact look we saw. I know I'm about to hit that hole off the tight end's butt, and I know I got a puller. Like, it's over with. And so I think that, being really secure in what you're seeing, I think that's one of the biggest weapons Jalen Milroe has right now. And I think it's going to be up to Georgia in a couple of weeks to make sure they throw something different because both these quarterbacks from last year's SEC title game are returning, but Bama is the one with the different offensive and defensive coordinators, which I think is definitely an X factor heading into 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. Well, one thing I really like that I don't think Alabama has totally utilized yet, but I think they will, is when Milroe kind of rolls out like he's going to run, and then all of a sudden he's just looking downfield to throw the football. And he's going to run it because he looks like that. He faked it a couple times last game, and immediately I'm like, man, that is going to be something that'll pay off.
Yeah. It honestly, and I don't like to even bring this program up, some of the ingenuity that they were using last weekend was almost like Nick Marshall, Gus Malzahn-esque from what they used to see. It used to be like, man, how can anybody possibly stop that when your quarterback runs a 4.4 and your running back's a 4.4 and you have good blocking up front? Like, it seems impossible, right? You almost have to go in and work backwards defensively for that gameplay. Like, let's start with stopping this, and then let's work backwards because it just seems impossible. But you're right. I mean, Jalen Milroe at this point, and I think definitely was this case last weekend, he is always the best player on the field, right? Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I'm not saying he's the most consistent, but when you look at upper echelon, when you look at best athletes, when you look at most physically gifted, there's not a field he's going to walk onto maybe this season, that he's not going to be the best athlete. So that's something you have to take into account. I've gotten some pushback from people asking questions about Nick Sheridan and this offense. Like I said, I know you're going to deal with some 3-and-outs. I know it was spotty against South Florida, but man, you look at the vertical attacking route tree that they are running, and it's almost like it reminds you of the offense with Tua, but you also have a quarterback that's 230 and runs a 4.4. I mean, it's frightening. So I think if they can find that level of consistency and some of the intermediate throws, I know Jalen also, he was awesome last week in some of those downfield throws, but we don't see many crossing routes, right? You don't see many of the mesh kind of routes over the middle. If you can find that and that way find consistency to get first downs and sustain drives, it's going to be a deadly combination, to your point about the RPOs and the things coming out off the edge.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's been a lot of fun to watch. I think you'll appreciate this. Watching the way that this team's played 3 weeks, they remind me of Bobby Bowden's Florida State teams. And I'm going to tell you why. Be like, you'd see teams hang around, and then all of a sudden you get hit with a flurry of punches and they score 3 or 4 touchdowns on you in like 5 minutes. And I remember watching those teams and when he was at his best, and that's how these guys are. The way that they finished the game against South Florida, the way that they finished the first half against Wisconsin, it's like all they got to do is just kind of hang in there and wait, And at some point, just like those Florida State teams, you know that somebody's going to make a big play. They're going to get momentum. And then Alabama could take, a 10-3 lead and turn it into, a 24-3 lead.
And look, there's
you remember those teams?
No, yeah, no, I definitely do. I think actually, and I got to give this guy credit. Joel Klatt actually said this in the broadcast, which it was interesting watching a Bama Joel Klatt broadcast. Just to throw that out there. But he says in the broadcast, he goes, it's like watching Mike Tyson box. It's not always like the best defense, but you know that you're going to make one mistake and you're going to lower a hand and you're going to be on the mat. Like you're absolutely going to lower your guard for a split second and you're going to be knocked out. Listen, I said this on social media kind of during the game or after the game. This is it's a tinkering offense. It's almost like we're going to run this play. It didn't work. Let's try to run it again and tinker one thing. Let's see if we can get the guard to pull a little bit tighter. And then let's also throw in the RPO over the back of the linebacker that's stepping up too hard. It's like, let me just tinker small things. And all of a sudden it all comes together and bow, like you got hit for a 60-yard gain. Let's just call it what it is, Mick, and I'll go ahead and throw this out there. If Jalen Milroe is throwing the ball down the field along the sidelines the way he did last weekend, I don't know if there's a team in the country that can beat Alabama. I just don't. I mean, yes, they have issues. They have depth issues on the offensive line. They have corner issues, I think, where the young freshman corners are a little bit of a step behind. You see some receivers running free every now and then. But Jalen Milroe throwing to these guys, Jeremy Bernard and, Ryan Williams and whoever else, man, and you add in those two running backs, if Jalen is hitting those throws along the sidelines that he hit a couple of times last week, there's just not going to be anybody that can go blow for blow. I mean, Ohio State's loaded. Yes. I don't know if they're ready for that brand of football. And Georgia, like you mentioned earlier, I didn't see much in the way of dynamic playmakers with what they were doing against Kentucky last weekend. So it definitely, taking a step back and looking at it from that standpoint, it was a good weekend for Alabama in that regard.
Yeah, a lot of fun. One question I want to ask you is, who's the best transfer from Washington that came with Coach DeBoer? Is it Parker Brailsford snapping the ball? How about Cuevas, the tight end, with a touchdown? Bernard starting to make some catches. I feel like it's one of those three guys, but pretty impressive. When you bring some guys come with you, that they're all really contributing. Who do you think, though, is the best of the transfers?
Come on, Mick. You're setting me up to eat here. I'm going to go with Brailsford, man. And it's not to take anything away from any of those other guys, but here's the bottom line. Parker Brailsford is in charge of other people, right? And that's like you can go out and do your own thing, wide receiver, and make your blocks at tight end or whatever else. Parker Brailsford was a member of a great offensive line a year ago and is the center point of a great offensive line right now when they're fully healthy, right? You add in the snaps, which have obviously been a major snafu for Alabama with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and the consistency in that aspect, although, you had some slip-ups here and there with that. But it's Brailsford to me because of what he means as far as understanding this offense, right? It can be a lot more difficult to transition to an offense when you get a new scheme. But from what he understands protection-wise, you saw slip-ups in protection against Michigan. I mean, Caden Proctor – against Michigan and Georgia and all these other teams, it was like, I'm not sure if I got the inside gap or if I have the speed rush or whatever else is going on. Brailsford being that center point and being able to help everybody else understand what their duties are while also bringing the consistency at his own position gives him a little notch up for me, man. You know how I am. I'm going to point to the center every time. I
was talking about Bernard on the postgame show, and somebody's like, "What about Brailsford?" And then I was even talking about Keon Sabb being the best transfer that Alabama got, but Brailsford's there as well. So the staff has done a really nice job of bringing in these transfers, and then those guys contributing. I mean, you lose Caleb Downs, that's a big loss, but Keon Sabb has been a big get for Alabama. And I mean, this defense has played really well.
I'll be honest with you too. I hold a special spot in my heart for Damani Jackson because I still remember Damani Jackson from USC. When he comes on the visit, I think Bama was in bowl practice, and you see, him meeting Coach Saban and shaking his hand. And I thought, oh, Coach Saban's going to give him the recruiting pitch. Well, then Saban's gone, and you look at it from that aspect, and you're like, man, I hope that kid sticks around, right? Long term, and he does, and he's a good player. But it's so funny, Mick, because it's such a new day and age where I'm like, man, who is that kid? I'm like, oh yeah, he transferred in. Who is that kid? Where did they recruit him from? Oh yeah, he transferred in. So it's just funny to watch, man. But I'm a huge fan of what Keon Sabb does on the back end. I think he's the ball hawk that the secondary needs. And look, man, you look all the way down this list of teams that Bama's going to play throughout the season. I think that the offense is going to have its ups and downs, its hiccups. You're going to have the three and outs. Can the defense respond when the offense can't, and when the offense isn't being consistent? Can the defense respond with that secondary and shut down some of these other passing games? That, to me, when it's all said and done, when we get to the end of the season and look back on what Alabama was in 2024, the secondary is going to hold a very, very heavy piece of that, defining what this team can be.
Hanging out with Mike Johnson here on the All-American Report, and we appreciate you guys being with us. Don't forget that Cover Crimson, covercrimson.com. We want you to be a part of that. Get on the message board and see what we're doing. Get on there and comment. Alabama, we talk about the Tide every day, everything that's going on, and we want you to do that as well with us on covercrimson.com. Right now, sign up for $1, or you do the annual subscription and you get the Cover Crimson t-shirt as part of that. So, be a part of this as we build this thing from the ground up. Mike, it has been, obviously for you, always with Georgia in the backyard. Interesting to see them struggle like they did against Kentucky. What can you take from that game against Kentucky? I mean, whoever saw a 13-12 game in the first place? And then does that, and maybe I'm just totally off base here, but I feel like it makes Georgia a lot more dangerous when you should have lost, but you win. And now you're getting ready for Alabama.
I think I'm kind of shocked to hear you say that, because they did get the win. I think they would have been more dangerous probably if they would have lost. The embarrassment that they would have felt from that game, getting back to the grind and, going through this bye week and doing those things. I think sometimes the win, even when you don't play well, kind of comforts you. Nick Saban used to say it all the time. You have to find the ability to dig deep even when you've won, right? And understand how badly you actually did play in some of these things. So I don't know, man. I would tell you this. I would have probably guessed, after the South Florida game or even before it, that I would have probably favored Georgia in that matchup, just because I don't know that Bama is what they will be once they get more comfortable this year under Kalen DeBoer. I think there's a lot of things with this program we're kind of still feeling out. We're kind of still trying to understand. Those players are trying to understand what Kalen DeBoer is in these crunch time situations and vice versa, right? So not that I think that Georgia, is a national championship shoe-in, but I think 2 weeks ago I'd have probably said Georgia's probably edged in this matchup in Tuscaloosa. I think David Pollack put it pretty good on Twitter after this Georgia game, or maybe during the Georgia game. He's like, I see a lot of good players on Georgia's offense. I don't know if I see any great players on Georgia's offense right now. And I think that's the concern when you go on from Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, and you need guys to kind of replace broken tackles and explosive plays, and you can't find that. That's when, as a Georgia fan, this was not smoke and mirrors from Kentucky, man. They got hit in the mouth.
Right.
As far as their defense goes, running downhill on Georgia. So I don't know, man. It's been interesting to kind of diagnose, and I'm glad. I was glad, Mick, that there's a 2-week buildup, because I don't know that I could get it done in the next few days of trying to figure out what my feelings are in this game. I know it's going to be a good one, though, and I'm excited to see it actually shape up.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, it is exciting. It's going to be one of those games of the century type feels, right? Georgia number 2 right now, Bama number 4, both teams off. ESPN Game Day will be there. Everything that's going on in the world of college football will focus on Tuscaloosa, which I always think is a good thing. And by the way, the tailgate show, you were a part of the tailgate show. We're going to record the radio version of the tailgate show Friday. at Innisfree. We'll be there 1 to 4. So Jake Coker, and who knows, maybe Ryan Anderson again. He was on with us last week. Maybe you, Mike. When are you coming to Tuscaloosa? Come on, man.
I know, man. It was so funny. I had a couple of people when I went over for the Saban field dedication. It was like, man, you're in town. I was like, dude, I literally was in town for like 3 hours. I spent more time on the way in the car than I actually did in Tuscaloosa because I wanted to be there for that moment. But hopefully soon, man. I got to get over there and really get a chance to breathe it all in. I mean, Innisfree, my goodness, dude. That's going to be a good time. So hopefully sooner than later, man. We'll get up and we'll throw the headsets on for old time's sake.
It'd be fun. It'd be fun. You missed a great time down at the floor, Bama. That was last week. But the bottom line is this, is that Alabama and Georgia, we're going to be previewing this thing for 2 weeks. But you got to finish up the Wisconsin stuff. It's almost like you got to eat your lima beans and all your vegetables and everything to get to the dessert, I mean, even though I think that's the main course, you got to finish the stuff you don't want to eat to get to the good stuff. Your final thoughts on that game at Camp Randall. And I know when Van Dyke went down, I don't think Wisconsin was going to win anyway. I think that they were out athleted at about every spot. But when that happened, their coach was exactly right when he told his team, you got your ass whooped. That was a physical beat down, and they'll have a chance to do something about that next year because they'll come to Tuscaloosa. But your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I kind of feel incomplete about what I want to give, the defense as far as a grade because the Tyler Van Dyke injury just kind of, I don't want to say it waters everything down. You still played really well, but I think it was like, I think after he goes down, you just simply say, I'm gonna force his backup to beat us. I don't care what happens. The running game's not going to beat us. I'm going to force the backup to make some throws. He was inconsistent, although I think he's going to be a pretty good player, specifically in that offense. But I feel a little bit incomplete about the defense. I think there were some plays to probably be had if a better offense had been on the field. But I love the physicality, man. I love how they got after it up front. It's such a new day and age, Mick, the way we're going to be able to rush the passer. Not that it's better or worse, but so many things that you did in a Nick Saban defense was to just simply have contain on the quarterback and push the pocket and make him uncomfortable. To see guys ripping and swim moving on the edge and trying to get in the backfield is just, it's still insane to me. So hats off to the defense. But like I said, I would love to see more consistent, 5-yard, 8-yard runs from the offense. But it's hard to complain when you're as explosive as they are. It's like if I have to sell my soul on consistency and get the explosion, which one do you really want? You know what I mean? And I think I probably want that explosive offense is just so much better looking right now. But you're going to be going up against better players the rest of the way. There's no doubt about it. And so you had to find that consistency too. But I feel great about what this team did as far as going into a hostile environment and dealing with everything they had to deal with. I also was really concerned about Jalen Milroe's throws along the sideline against South Florida. I did not feel like he was in sync with his wide receivers. They weren't getting open. He was overthrowing it. That completely erased it facing Wisconsin. I feel so much better about his deep ball accuracy once again, the way he finished last year. So I feel good, man. Honestly, I feel about as good as you can if this is a full health Alabama team going into this matchup in a couple of weeks, because I do think you make or break your season in a lot of ways. But I feel good about the Wisconsin game, man. It was nice to see a physical brand of football up front on both sides of the ball and to see that explosive offense come around with Jalen Milroe at the helm.
All right, last thing, Ryan Williams scored another touchdown. He's becoming a household name in college football. I don't think that he would have this same success if Nick Saban were still head coach. I think he'd have success, but I don't think he'd have 4 touchdowns in the first 3 games. I think that the combination of Kalen DeBoer, he's the quarterback wide receiver whisperer. And the fact that Kalen DeBoer is a lot more willing to play young players in crucial spots than Coach Saban was. Not to say there's a right or a wrong way here, but I feel like Kalen DeBoer we owe Kalen DeBoer a lot of credit for the development so fast of Ryan Williams.
It's just wild, man, because you look at what Washington was last year with, I think they had it was at least 3 wide receivers that were drafted. Mm-hmm. If I'm not missing a 4th, honestly. And so when you look at what they were in Washington and you look at how the speed that they had out wide was able to stress defenses so bad.
Right.
And it's not always 4 verticals, but their route combinations in this offense do not come from running side to side so much as they simply do. We're all running downfield. The safety better pick one. The corner better pick one. You better be in cover 4 by the time it's all said and done, because we will pick you apart, down the field. So I think Ryan Williams just fits perfectly into that, right? It's not, I don't have to be a terribly technical route runner. I have to have, athleticism and speed, and then I have to catch the ball when it comes my way. So I think he's like right now, he's college's version of like a Tyreek Hill in that Miami offense, right? He's just so freaking fast and athletic that once the ball is in his hands, he can just kind of go to work. And I think it's a perfect marriage. I'm really interested to see how they utilize his skill set as we get into the bulk of the SEC schedule, because he is he's obviously young. He's more on the slider side. But gosh, man, in today's day and age in college football, when guys can run wide open and kind of go unchecked, you don't have to worry about their head getting taken off across the middle. He just fits perfectly, man. I just think it's a perfect marriage. And, he's a guy that obviously Bama's hoping to utilize for the years to come. But, woo, I can tell you right now, I would not want to be lined up at corner facing the Kalen DeBoer offense with Ryan Williams squared up with me.
Yeah, right. Another 4 touchdowns in 3 games. He's become the go-to guy. And I'm looking back at the greats, Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Smitty, Waddle, Ruggs, Judy, Mechie. I mean, you can go through, man. I mean, it's like this. None of those guys started out like this. None of them.
Yeah. And not only that, none of them skipped their senior year of high school to do it a year early. We can talk about him being a freshman. He's really a minus freshman, right? Guy should be, going to his homecoming dance this weekend. It's incredible to watch, man. So like I said, hats off to him. And it takes, I've only ever seen it done a couple of times when I was in college. I mean, I've told you before, I will never forget the first time I saw Julio Jones. I'll never forget it. I was always skeptical of these 5-star and big time recruits. And I remember seeing Julio Jones and be like, oh, that's what everybody's talking about, I guess. That makes a lot more sense to me. Andre Smith was the same way. Andre Smith, my boy, is probably one of the most gifted athletes to ever come into that program, and just pound for pound. And I would always be like, 5-star lineman, number 1 lineman. And then you watch him, pass set and take on a bull rush and then pancake somebody, and you're like, yeah, that's what that looks like. Ryan Williams, dude, 2-time Alabama Player of the Year, graduates early. You come, you're like, I don't know what we're getting. He's still young. That's what they've been talking about, Mick. Now I see it. Now I'm starting to be like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Roll Tide, baby. I love it, man. I love this guy. And he's out doing the NIL stuff. He's got a podcast. It's actually pretty good.
Mick, I'll tell you this. Nick Saban is rolling over in his cubicle, wherever it is in Bryant Stadium. But when I saw that podcast come out, I was like, man, there are a lot of ways that Nick Saban changed over the years. I can promise you that is one way that man would have not changed, is putting a microphone in front of a 17-year-old kid in his program. I'm like, dude, I just laugh thinking about the look on his face when somebody brings him that idea and him being like, no, we're not going to do that. That's actually not going to be something we do. But hats off, man. I love that for them. That's going to be cool.
Oh, man. That's so true, too, man. That's a new day and age, man. Hey, guys.
It is. So funny.
All-American Reports brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Use the promo code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. That's right. MyBookie will double your initial deposit using the promo code NEXTROUND. Kick off the season with MyBookie.ag and double your initial deposit using the promo code NEXTROUND. Boom, right there. On the Cover Crimson message board right now, I'm really locked in on this thread, Mike. The early line for Alabama, Georgia was 7.5. That's all the way down to 2.5 right now. I mean, I'm trying to find it on ESPN. I think they pulled it. Like the combination of Alabama beating Wisconsin on the road handily, which was like one of the worst beatdowns they've had at Camp Randall in years. And then Georgia struggling at Kentucky, which I don't read into that as much as the critics do. But Georgia would have. Can you imagine them coming to Tuscaloosa as a 7.5-point favorite? I mean, come on, people. They may win by 7.5, but to be the favorite, 2.5 to me is a lot closer to it. But your media people, you guys love them Georgia Bulldogs. It's like you don't watch the games. Watch the game. They're 1-5 against Alabama. You got to watch the game. Oh, they played last year. 1-5.
Let me ask you this, because I know we're going to talk about this game for the next couple of weeks. What's a bigger factor here? Is the home game a bigger factor, or is Georgia trying to get revenge and trying to really stake their claim in college football? Is that a bigger factor? Which one of those outweighs the other one, in your opinion? Because I was asked that question yesterday, and I was like, I don't really know. I think that the home factor anytime in college football is huge, but I live in Georgia. These people and that program are out for blood when it comes to Bama and the fact that Nick is not there. It's like they smell blood in the water, and they're like, it's go time. I can't decide which one it is.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I was a Georgia fan, I'd like some stuff here. Okay. First off, I would like the fact that it's the revenge game, right? We want to get back at them for last year. Milroe made those comments. He was like, hey, I saw the quit in their eyes. I know that's going to be everywhere for the next 2 weeks. And that's the kind of stuff that Saban did not like. Secondly, Alabama had this the week before when they didn't play well against South Florida. You win, but you feel like it's a loss. So you're definitely locked in. And and you're focused. So I think those two things, and then Alabama winning easily, even though, like you said, you still see a lot of things that need to be improved at Wisconsin. And so I think that works against Alabama. I felt like Alabama lost to Michigan. I'm listening to the press conferences, and Milroe's talking about the former staff and that they didn't think he should be a quarterback and all this stuff. And it's not that's not true. And it's not that it's not motivating to him. And I get that. It's that's not what you should be talking about when you're getting ready to play Michigan. You know this. You need to be focused on Michigan. And then in that game, Alabama did not look focused like they did against Georgia. How does Alabama deal with success? Because they didn't deal with it last year after they beat Georgia, in my opinion, well enough. And that's why Michigan won the national championship.
I think you're spot on, dude. I brought up the same thing when everybody, when it was making waves. Oh man, can you believe that Jalen Milroe, said they didn't want to be. I'm like, why are we talking about this, dude? Like, why is this even a topic right now with everything they have on deck? We have not reached the finish line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Lord knows I'm wired like that with my wife and kids. I'm like, she's like, well, he's drinking his milk and it's a good day. Thank God he's drinking his milk. And I'm like, well, let's get him in the car and get him to daycare. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to worry about the milk. We're not celebrating yet.
Yeah. Right.
The journey's not over, man. So yeah, I'm with you, man. It's like I said, obviously living over here, it's going to be a pretty incredible build up, man. But I feel as good right now about the matchup as a Bama guy as I've felt maybe all off season and all lead up to the game. Is that I just feel like this team. And sometimes bye weeks are a lot of help in this category mix. Sometimes it really is nice to get your feet wet and then take a step back and kind of rewatch all the game tape from the first 3 weeks and see what was good and see what was bad and really understand what your identity is. The downside to that is I think Georgia's doing the exact same thing, right? I mean, they're like, well, this didn't work. This did work. This didn't work. This is what we did against Clemson, but we didn't do against Kentucky. But I don't think that it's going to come down to just game planning and things like that. I think special players make special plays in big time situations, man. So we're going to see it all kind of come to a head in Tuscaloosa in a couple weeks.
Yep, I think that does it for this edition of the All-American Report. Oh, let me switch this here just to be accurate with our header. Mick Gillispie and Mike Johnson. We appreciate you guys. Comment section, get in there and comment. If you are a member of Cover Crimson, you want to ask Mike a question, you want to get in on, have a comment about the show, there's a thread. Make sure that you go in there and check it out. But be part of Cover Crimson. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. And we will talk with you, this crew anyway, later this week. So roll Tide. You going to give us a roll Tide, Mike?
Roll Tide. you.